Mirana.
Mirana's a hero that has a bit of an identity crisis. Is she a support? Is she a core? Is she about the magic damage or physical? She seems like the kind of person that needs to go on a long hero's journey to find out who she really is. Oh, she already did. Anyway, let's get into her kit. Mirana's innate makes healing Lotus is more effective for her team. Great in the early game, not as much in the late game. Her first spell is Starstorm. She drops some stars that deal damage, and the closest enemy to her gets another star that deals a bit less damage than the initial one. It's a good ability, but most people know Mirana for her. Sacred Arrow is her most iconic ability. She shoots an arrow which stuns the first enemy hero hit, but if it hits a creep, it instantly kills them. Much like Ashe's arrow from League, the stun duration and damage scale over the distance traveled, but it's not global. Still, the travel distance is pretty long. With an Ags, her arrow causes enemies that it passes by to get hit by a falling star, and the target hit by the arrow to take the extra Starstorm shot. It's a really strong upgrade, because it gives her insane burst potential. Leap is her mobility tool. She leaps forward and gets a boost to her move and attack speed upon landing. She gets 3 charges of this ability, but with a shard, she gets another charge, and that's not all. Her leap can target the landing area instead of just leaping forward, and she shoots a wave that deals damage and causes all targets to be hit by the secondary Starstorm if she casts it. Nice shard, good for any build. Her ultimate depends on her chosen facet. She either gets Moonlight Shadow, which causes all allied heroes of the map to turn invisible and gain a move speed boost, or Solar Flare, which gives Mirana and her allies a ramping attack speed buff, damage buff, and increased daytime vision, but this buff is weaker on allies. Both are great in a team fight, but I prefer the utility of Moonlight Shadow. If you're playing around Starstorm and Arrow, you're not going to take advantage of her damage and attack speed buff as much, and the invis forces your enemies to buy detection. Solar Flare can be better if your team has a lot of right clickers and you itemize to be one of them. For talents, Arrow cooldown at 10, since the cases where the extra leap distance will make a difference are few and far between. Ult evasion at 15 is really powerful, increasing your team's effective HP in a fight. Ult cooldown at 20, and multi-shot at 25. It makes your opponent start playing Dance Dance Revolution instead of Dota with the amount of arrows they'll need to dodge. I'd like to clarify that this is mainly for Magic Mirana since it's the safer playstyle. Starstorm is always good, and Arrow is deceptively easy to land with items like Atos and Yules to set it up. Despite having a strong disengage tool with Leap, Mirana's main weaknesses are divers with hard CC or heroes with enough raw damage. Zeus gets a shout out because he can finish you off with his ult and reveal your team if they have invis. On the other hand, Mirana loves people that can set up her arrow. Shadow Demon and Bane are good examples. Mirana has decent ganks in the early game if you can land her arrow, but otherwise she's kind of outclassed as a support. If you want to pick a ranged support that can blow people up and has scaling potential, Hoodwink is a safer option because of her potential for AoE stuns and ability to play at range because Mirana has to get close to utilize her Starstorm. That being said, a 5-second arrow always feels great to land and Mirana is still really fun. I personally feel she's better as a 3 and you build hit her with Solar Flare, but 4 Mirana is still worth mentioning.
Come to Muerta.
I'm hesitant to put Muerta on this list because she's designed to be a carry, but her power as a flex pick, especially in pro play, cannot be understated, so I'm listing her here. Her innate means that she can attack ethereal targets, dealing magic damage to them, and attack while ethereal herself. Good against certain heroes and Ghost Scepter buyers. Gunslinger is her third skill and passive. Every now and then she'll fire 2 shots, typically another target within range. If there are no other targets, she fires both of them at a single enemy. It can make her trades pretty good, but turn it off in lane to avoid pushing the wave. Deadshot is her hard CC tool. She shoots a bouncing bullet off either an enemy unit or a tree, dealing damage to the former or destroying the latter. The ricocheting bullet damages every enemy unit it passes through, stopping at the first enemy it hits and fearing them in the direction the bullet was flying. I like it, it's a cool ability. The fear is fun to play around with, and it's always funny to watch an enemy run into your tower during the laning stage. The calling is her ultimate that isn't an ultimate. She summons a few ghosts to circle an area where enemies are slowed and have reduced attack speed. If enemies touch a ghost, they are silenced and take a bit of damage. The area is pretty sizable and is an incredibly strong zoning tool in a team fight. Her facet, Dance to the Dead, causes the calling to reset its duration every time an enemy hero dies within the radius, as well as adding another spirit and increasing the radius of the ability. I would like it more if it didn't mess with the silence, but I'm still choosing this one over. Her other facet, Ofrenda, lets her choose her respawn location instead of the fountain. It's a tactical insertion from Call of Duty, and I hate this ability. It's another on-death facet, and I generally tend to dislike them, especially considering this hero was made to be a carry. In the early game, it acts as an insurance policy in case you get ganked. In the late game, you can place it before a team fight, but it's not an instant respawn, so if you want to get back into the fray, you still gotta pay your taxes. It is good if you use it like that though, since you also respawn with your ultimate active. Enemies can camp the Ofrenda, but Muerta can break it at any time. It's situationally good, but the situations where it's good are those that you don't want to be in the first place, namely dying in the early game, dying in the mid game, dying in the late game, and dying in general. If you don't die, you don't have a facet, so I'm gonna say Dance to the Dead is better, but I could be wrong. Pierce the Veil is her ultimate. It's a steroid that when used, Muerta becomes immune to all physical damage, and all her attacks deal magic damage instead. She also has phase movement in this state. Shard gives her spell lifesteal during this ability and lets her get spell amp passively and retroactively when enemy heroes die around her. With Ags, she gets Parting Shot, a weird ability that stuns a target hero, either enemy or allied, causing them to take reduced damage and separate their souls from their bodies. The soul can still cast spells, but that's it. After a few seconds, the soul returns to the body, applying a cleanse, but the body can still die, and if it does, the spirit dies after the duration. Don't overthink this ability. Most Muertas will just use it to catch an enemy hero and call it a day. It does have its niche uses when used on an ally, but in pubs, it's generally better to treat it like a CC tool. For talents, Deadshot range at 10, Deadshot damage at 15, Deadshot charges at 20, and Gunslinger chance at 25, since your right clicks will still hurt with your ult. Muerta is a very interesting hero that can deal magic damage and scale into a semi-carry. However, she does have her weaknesses as always. She has 0 mobility built into her kit, so most divers will ruin her day, and heroes with naturally high magic resist will nullify most of her DPS, like Anti-Mage and Viper. Muerta is a great damage dealer, being a good pick against squishies and tanks alike, but she's really best played as a flex pick. Pick her early in your draft and watch the enemy wonder whether you're a carry or a support. Thankfully, she has the tools that will help her fit into most teams.
Nyx Assassin.
I hate this hero because he can punish you for just playing the game normally. His innate is Nyx Sense, letting him detect invisible heroes in a short radius around him. It's useful, but it's not an excuse to skip dust and sentries. It's great for ganks and sniffing out gank attempts against players who are just adjusting to the new patch. Impale is Nyx's first skill. He stuns and damages enemies in a line in front of him. It's a skill shot though, so make sure to hit it. Mind Flare is Nyx's second ability. It deals damage based on the target's max mana, as well as extra damage based on how much Nyx has dealt to them in the past few seconds. Treat it like a combo finisher. Spiked Carapace, Nyx's E, provides incredibly good utility. Nyx pops spikes out of his person, stunning and returning the first instance of damage to any enemy hero that is foolish enough to poke the spiky bug. The beauty of this ability is that it rewards you for parrying strong spells, but you don't have to treat it as a parry. A lot of heroes have an AoE damaging ability, and Nyx can just walk into these and stun them. This makes certain heroes borderline unplayable against him. For an ultimate, Nyx gets Vendetta, turning invisible and getting a move speed boost. He can break the invis with an attack to deal bonus pure damage. He can also use Carapace while Vendetta to catch an enemy off guard without breaking the invis. With the Scuttle facet, Nyx is hasted and gains free pathing for a bit after using this ultimate. His other facet makes his damage from spells and items burn a percentage of their target's current mana. This is the safer facet, but Scuttle is pretty good too. Shard makes enemy targets hit by Vendetta take an increased amount of magic damage for a short period of time. It's okay, not a must-have by any means, but I like getting it against squishies. With an Ags, Nyx gets a really weird ability. He burrows in place, making him unable to attack, but he can use items. While burrowed, he also takes reduced damage from all sources and gets increased regen. All of his spells get increased range and CDR as well, with his stun and Mind Flare getting longer cast range, and Spike Carapace instantly stunning nearby enemies. The utility of this Ags makes it a great pickup, especially if you need something to help defend high ground. It completely changes your playstyle from assassin to turret. It's weird, but it oddly works. For talents, Vendetta damage at 10 because the other one makes such a tiny difference. Mind Flare cooldown is usually better at 15, Spike Carapace stun duration at 20, and Mind Flare radius at 25, unless you need the break talent. Early game, your job as Nyx is to get ganks with Vendetta and blow up squishies with your ult stun Mind Flare combo. Later on though, enemies will wisen up to your invis shenanigans and buy sentries or a gem. Either double down on the assassin playstyle with Dagon or go for more utility with Yules and Ags. Either way, Blink Dagger is good to set up your stuns. Unfortunately, Nyx gets outscaled and falls off pretty hard in the late game, most of the time only offering stuns and mana burn if you chose that facet. Play to his strengths and try to end the game with your team as soon as possible. He also doesn't do particularly well against tanks since he only really has one combo. However, Nyx is great against pretty much every hero in the game, but there are heroes he hard counters like Queen of Pain, Batrider, Storm Spirit, Sniper, and of course, Dawnbreaker. Because of the utility of Carapace and Impale, Nyx is never really a bad pick. There are cases where you'll want a +4 that can deal a bit more sustained damage, but overall, Nyx is a great hero.
Pugna.
Damn, I love Pugna. As soon as the match begins, I have the cute little green guy all to myself. I know that nothing's gonna stop me from smiling and laughing for the next hour or so. Oblivion Savant is his innate and lets him use spells and items while channeling. This innate would be pretty situational if it weren't for his ultimate. Life Drain, aka the Gok Gok 5000, is a channeled spell that gives vision over the target and deals damage every second. The damage dealt also heals Pugna, but if his health is full, it heals his mana instead. He can target a teammate to heal them at the cost of his own life. In its its current state, this ability has a 7-second cooldown, so feel free to be a bit of a dirty hoe and just gok everything you see. His axe cuts the cooldown even further and also steals the opponent's spell damage, giving it to Pugna. It's a really good upgrade, especially in an extended teamfight. Pair this with Pugna's third ability, Nether Ward, places a ward in an area and zaps targets every time they cast a spell, dealing damage based on the mana cost of their abilities. Enemies can break the ward, but it does have a large AoE and can be hidden away. With Shard, Ward's cast range is increased, and Pugna can gok his own ward to have the gok spread to nearby enemies for less damage. With his siphoning ward facet, Nether Ward also heals Pugna for a bit of HP and mana when it strikes a foe. Outside of the gok, and look man, I'm sorry if it's getting old, I just have way too much brain rot. Pugna's main damage tool is Nether Blast. After a brief delay, it blows up in an area, dealing damage to enemies caught within. It also deals damage to towers, making it great for pushing. Speaking of pushing, he also has a facet that gives him some extra spell amp per destroyed enemy tower. This is good for pushing, the other is good for fighting. I prefer this one. Finally, Decrepify allows him to turn a target ethereal, preventing them from attacking or being attacked, unless they're Muerta. When Decrepify, enemies take increased magic damage while allies get increased healing. As a general rule, use Decrep on your chosen gok target before giving them the suck. For talents, 200 health at 10 since the other one is extremely situational, Nether Blast cooldown at 15 for more DPS and pushing potential, Decrepify duration at 20, and Nether Blast damage at 25 for even more pushing. Pugna is a powerful offensive support, but don't sleep on his defensive capabilities. Life Drain and Decrep can make it incredibly challenging for the enemy team to focus down a target. Being a backline squishy with no mobility, Pugna hates divers like Huskar and Primal Beast. He has quite a few synergies though. Heroes like Leshrac and Zeus enjoy his magic damage amp, but his best teammate is probably Muerta, who can just gun down a Decrep target. He works great in magic heavy lineups, and if you can live until the end of a team fight, you bring great pushing power as well. My favorite hero in the whole game, and I hope to do him justice. Rubick's innate ability is that he gains damage and magic resist for building spell amp. It's nice to have, but his real innate is that he has near instant cast time on all of his spells, including the ones he gets from. His ultimate, Spell Steal, gives him a copy of a target enemy hero's last used spell. This means basic abilities, ultimate, shards, and ag spells. As long as the enemy has to cast it, it's on the table. This is both amazing and a drawback because enemies can stop you from stealing their most powerful spell by using another one beforehand. You can steal a game-changing ultimate like Magnus's Reverse Polarity, or you can spell steal a Tidehunter after your Ravages only to blink in and Anchor Smash. Aghanim's Scepter upgrades all stolen spells if they can be upgraded and lets Rubick steal 2 separate abilities, letting him set up his own combos. It is the best Aghanim's upgrade in the game because it's all of them. The Frugal Filch facet makes stolen spells have a lower mana cost. This is actually pretty good against heroes like Skywrath Mage, allowing you to spam stolen spells pretty easily. Besides all of that, Spell Steal is a really good ability for breaking things like Linken's Sphere and Mirror Shield. Telekinesis is Rubick's hard CC tool. He lifts a target, disabling it before slamming it into the ground and stunning enemies in the landing area. Rubick can choose where the target lands within a short radius from where the target was initially lifted. Note that this spell deals no damage to the lift target, but it can damage enemies in the landing area with a 10 talent. With Shard, Rubick can target allies, letting him throw them as needed. Throw range is increased and lift duration is reduced, and Rubick can also use it on himself. It's weird, but it's a mobility tool, so learn how to use it. Fade Bolt is Rubick's damage tool. It's a bouncing blast of magic that deals damage to a target, decreases their attack damage, and bounces to a nearby enemy. The damage decreases with every bounce, but the damage reduction applies all the same. Use it to secure last hits on the range creep or be a cheeky fuck and steal kills. And finally, his third ability is Arcane Supremacy, which grants Rubick extra spell amp and cast range. Note that because of his innate, Rubick also gets magic resist and attack damage from this ability. His Arcane Accumulation facet increases the AoE of his spells every time he casts one. I take this one into most matches because Rubick doesn't normally have mana problems. For talents, landing damage at 10 can be useful for the extra chip damage in a team fight, stolen spell cooldown at 15, Fade Bolt cooldown at 20 for better wave clear and pushing, and stolen spell amp at 25 if there's an easily spammable nuke to steal. Otherwise, take the land distance. I am prepared to take a lot of heat for saying this, but it's gotta be said. This hero is not that good. Am I saying that Rubick is a bad pick? Of course not. Far from it. He's an amazing hero, but a lot of people tend to overrate how useful he really is. The problem with Rubick is that he's balanced around two things: pro play and the enemy picks. He's not like Sylas in League, which is almost always a decent pick because of the other parts of his kit. Rubick is built around Spell Steal, a mechanic that even if you're literally the best Rubick player in the world, is inherently unreliable because of other factors like getting hunted down by divers, enemy BKB usage, Lincolns, etc. His stun is instant and point and click, and it pulls enemies back, but it's no punch hook, and the stun doesn't last for very long. Not even 2 seconds without the talent in its current state. So your team better be ready to follow up. And it's very easy to mess up a chain stun because you might pull someone out of an incoming stun and grief by accident. And remember, it deals no damage to the lift target, even with the talent. Not to mention that it has a 15-second cooldown in the current iteration. So in many engagements, you're going to use it maybe twice, thrice at most in a fight. Fade Bolt hurts, especially with a maxed out passive, but for a main damaging spell, its cooldown is on the longer side, and you'll really wish you had another one to combo it with. Rubick needs to steal another ability from the enemy team to be most effective. Otherwise, he'll have 2 slightly above average spells that don't really synergize with each other. If it's a good Rubick game, it's fine. There should be plenty of other spells to utilize, but if there's nothing to steal, this hero feels like garbage to play. When I was still a ranked warrior, I would be forced to blind Rubick, and then I'd be facing heroes with nothing decent to steal, like Ursa, Phantom Assassin, Earth Spirit, and Axe. In about half of my games, I would have much rather been playing someone who would always be useful, like Lion. His real weakness is that his effectiveness is gated behind something completely outside of his control, the enemy team's draft. But that does not mean Rubick is weak. The hero is best used as a response pick or a deny pick. He is a strong counter, if not banned beforehand, against big teamfight heroes like Enigma, but Rubick is actually at his best when he's stealing small skirmishing spells instead. Jakiro's entire stealable kit is useful, same with Lion and Shadow Shaman. Underlord also gets a mention because Firestorm and Pit with Rubick's AoE bonuses and cast range are just absolutely criminal. There are also heroes with guaranteed steals. OD, for example, is a free banish. He's not the best pick in a lot of games, but in the games that he is, he's a menace. If you're a POS 4 player and you haven't added Rubick to your hero pool, he's a great addition. This hero rewards you for the time spent playing him. Despite his high skill ceiling, his base kit is incredibly forgiving and great for new players. I would suggest spamming him for a few dozen games or so, and then you'll start to get a feel of what a good Rubick game looks like. I love this hero, and I hope that you learn to love him too.
Skywrath Mage.
Skywrath Mage is a rare case of Dota ripping off Call of Duty because he's clearly inspired by the goddamn AC-130 because he flies and blows people up. What a shameless ripoff. Anyway, his innate gives him free spell lifesteal, giving him extra survivability. He has another passive depending on his chosen facet. Shield of the Scion gives him a magic barrier when he hits enemies with his spells, while Staff reduces his cooldowns instead. His former is more consistent, and the latter could use a numbers tweak before I call it good. His main spell is Arcane Bolt. It's a slow-moving projectile that deals damage based on Skywrath's intelligence stat. You're gonna be spamming this ability a lot, especially with Shard that shoots out a secondary bolt. His second spell, Concussive Shot, is a homing missile that seeks out the nearest target, prioritizing heroes. When it hits, it deals damage and slows. His third spell is Ancient Seal. Point and click on an enemy hero, silence them, and make them take increased spell damage. His ultimate is Mystic Flare, which deals massive damage over a short duration. It splits the damage evenly though, so try and hit just one guy. Aghanim Scepter doesn't upgrade any of his abilities, but rather makes him cast another Concussive Shot, Ancient Seal, or Mystic Flare on another target within range. For talents, Mana Regen at 10, trust me, you'll need it. Ancient Seal cooldown at 15, especially against heroes like Storm Spirit and Puck. Ancient Seal magic damage at 20 because the other one is too gimmicky, and Mystic Flare damage at 25. Skywrath Mage has a whole lot of damage and not a lot of CC, so he'll need teammates who can lock an enemy down for him. He has 2 classic combos, Faceless Void and Legion Commander, but really anyone with a stun is good in his book. He hates silences, backline assassins who can focus him down, and of course, Pugna. His Nether Ward will limit how much you can do in a fight, and really hurts when you cast Mystic Flare.
Spirit Breaker.
AKA Bara, AKA Space Cow, whatever you want to call him. When you play against this hero, you don't get to play the game. His defining characteristic is his passive Greater Bash. Every time he attacks an enemy, he has a chance to stun them and knock them back, as well as dealing extra damage based on his move speed. While it claims to have a 17% chance, you really gotta believe the gacha gods are protecting you, because if they're against you, he can easily bash you into oblivion. And the bash goes through BKB, an item whose sole purpose is to prevent you from getting stunned against most spells. This is what I mean when I say this hero doesn't let you play the game. His actual innate is Herd Mentality. He grants catch-up XP to the lowest XP unit on his team. No downsides or drawbacks or anything. It's good and your POS 5 will love you for it. He also has Charge of Darkness, a point and click ability. SB can just run at a target, bashing enemies along the way and gaining extra move speed. The final target is stunned and of course, bashed. Oh, and it's global, so let's say you're a top lane, you could just charge right to mid lane for a gank. And don't trust the tooltip. The ability pierces BKB. Hopefully they fix that soon. His Bull Rush facet makes the bonus move speed linger for a short time depending on the charge duration. You can use this for hit and run tactics, but it's also also good for getting an extra bash or two in for bonus damage. His shard gives him extra charge move speed, which means extra bash damage. Kinda boring, but stats are stats and we'll take it. His second ability is Bulldoze. It's a defensive steroid giving him bonus move speed and status resistance, aka tenacity for League players, meaning debuffs don't last as long on him when he has it active. He can activate it while charging to increase bash damage. It's incredibly strong. His ultimate Nether Strike is a point and click nuke. After a brief wind up, SB appears behind a target, bashing them for double the distance and dealing bonus damage. It goes through BKB because of course it does, and is really strong. His imbalanced facet, not make a comment, that's what it's called, causes the Nether struck target to be knocked back even further, and all forced movement from allied sources that the target experiences is greatly increased. It's fun for catching people out with your Nether Strike and bashing them into your team, but Bull Rush is generally safer and less gimmicky. For an Ags upgrade, SB gets Planar Pocket, another self buff. He gains greatly increased magic resistance and diverts all targeted abilities and effects from enemy sources around him to himself. This ability is actually kinda nuts. You won't notice it in a team fight, and you'll wonder why the hell your Hex isn't going onto the enemy Phantom Assassin. It's really strong, especially when paired with Bulldoze to nullify the duration of any stuns you'll eat. For talents, Night Vision at 10, Bulldoze cooldown at 15, Bulldoze Barrier at 20 to be even harder to kill, and bash damage at 25. As Spirit Breaker, you're a global threat that the enemy team has to account for. Don't spend the early game farming up big items. Instead, create space and openings for your team with your charge and bashes. Spirit Breaker can be hard to lock down, but his weakness is Dispels because Bulldoze can be removed, and saves since he's mainly a single target damage dealer. Oracle and Shadow Demon are both hard counters to him since they both have a save and a Dispel, and if you have neither of these heroes, a Yule Scepter will do just fine. SB is the prototypical diver. He goes in with his increased status resist and just breaks everything around him, like, well, a bull in a china shop. Pick him if your team needs someone that can make space and create opportunities for early game kills. Some classic synergies include global strat heroes like Zeus, Spectre, and Dawnbreaker, as well as Lifestealer for the Infest Bomb. Wait, did I say bomb?
Techies!
This hero used to be a plague on the game, and now he's a really strong team fighter and ganker that has some potential to become a late game carry. He has 3 facets, 2 of which are passives. Squeeze Scope gives him extra attack range based on his attack speed, and Spoon Stash lets him treat his backpack slots as extra item slots. For mobility and teamfight initiation, Techies gets Blast Off. When cast, he leaps into an area, dealing damage and stunning enemies in the landing AoE. It has a health cost in addition to the mana cost, so make sure to account for that. His third facet, Spleen's Secret Sauce, gives this ability increased damage based on the target's health. His main poke tool is Sticky Bomb. He throws a bomb that damages and slows targets after a short delay upon landing. If it lands near an enemy hero, it latches onto them. His survivability comes with his W reactive taser. He applies a buff to himself for a few seconds, giving him bonus move speed, and any enemies that attack Techies during this time are disarmed and receive a basic dispel. When the ability ends, Techies releases a pulse that applies the disarm again. With a shard, this ability can be cast on teammates, and enemies disarmed by this ability also take damage. Proximity Mines is Techies' ultimate. He places a permanent mine in an area and it blows up and reveals itself if an enemy gets too close. It has a brief delay and enemies can hit the mine to destroy it before it blows up, but if they don't in time, they take damage and have reduced magic resistance. This ability gets 3 charges and deals damage to towers as well. Typically, you almost never want to have triple mines ready. You want to be planting them anywhere you think the enemy will walk or use them for farming. They're great for dissuading enemies from ganking and controlling objectives like runes and Roshan. The play is usually to just place it uphill, forcing the enemy to waste time and resources just to destroy it. Techies also gets a temporary minefield sign as an innate. This makes it such that enemies can't destroy mines in the area while it's up. With an Ags, minefield sign becomes a powerful team fighting ability, creating a minefield around it and causing enemies to take damage after moving a certain distance. It makes a team fight even more chaotic and is a really fun Ags. For talents, Procs Mine cooldown at 10, Blast Off damage at 15, Blast Off cooldown at 20, and Procs Mine's delay at 25. This is assuming you're not doing some weird hitter Techies build and playing entirely around dealing more damage with your spells. Your goal is Techies is to make your enemy have less fun, whether it's by blowing them up with your Blast Off Sticky Bomb combo, disarming them with your taser, stopping them from moving with your Ags, or zoning them with your mines. You're just annoying to play against, and it's a damn effective tactic. However, you do have counterplay. Because of the nature of his mines, he's better against melee heroes than ranged ones. He doesn't do much against BKB targets, and tanks, illusions, and summoned units can very easily get rid of the minefield traps that you painstakingly took the time to create. For synergies though, Techies offers a lot of kill pressure in lane with his Blast Off. Pick him with someone that can set up his stun like Slardar or Kunkka and watch your enemy safe lane fall apart. He's a strong pick if you need some teamfight damage, but more importantly, he's just really fun.
Tiny.
One of the most flexible heroes in Dota despite being a literal rock. You can play him in any role except maybe pos 5. For an innate, Tiny gets Craggy Exterior. Every time an enemy attacks Tiny, they gain a stacking debuff that reduces their attack damage. He also gets a facet that gives him bonus slow and status resistance based on his strength attribute. Tiny's natural strength gain is pretty good, so this adds up over the course of the game with items. Tiny's first spell is Avalanche. He shoots out a bunch of rocks to stun and damage enemies in front of him. It also grants extra damage to units affected by Toss. Tiny's W yeets the nearest unit to Tiny, whether enemy or ally, to the target unit or rune, dealing damage in an area. Note that only enemies, whether they're the ones being tossed or the ones being tossed at, will take damage. You can also toss targets to themselves, and this ability also damages towers. With the Crash Landing facet, enemies in the landing area take extra damage and are slowed. Note that the extra damage and slow is not applied to the thrown unit if they're an enemy. Tree Grab gives Tiny's autos a little extra kick. Tiny grabs the tree, and for a few hits, he gains increased attack damage and building damage and cleaves in an area in front of his target. At any point, he can throw the tree to deal damage from a distance and slow enemies' hit. He can buy a shard to remove the hit counter and increase the damage of all thrown trees. And this is useful because of his Tree Volley is Tiny's Ags upgrade, and when activated, he throws all trees in an area around him at a target area, applying Tiny's damage and attack modifiers like slows and crits. This ability can deal some serious damage if Tiny itemizes around it. Finally, Tiny's ultimate is Grow, a passive. Upon leveling this ultimate, he grows in size, sacrificing his attack speed to gain bonus damage, armor, move speed, and bonus damage to toss. All of that is useful, especially when you consider that Tiny has no agility gain, thus he gains 0 armor from levels. For talents, Ava cast range at 10 is surprisingly useful, Ava damage at 15 since your damage will mainly be coming from either your combo or Tree Volley, Tree Grab damage at 20, and Toss charges at 25. This is just a basic overview of Tiny's kit, but his gameplay has a lot more depth than what's shown here. Toss has a huge skill ceiling and can be used incredibly creatively, and even then, you can just blink Avatoss and delete squishies the whole game. If you build damage items, you can either build attack speed or Ags and get the benefit from them normally. Like I said in the beginning, Tiny is just incredibly flexible. Tiny's weakness is sustained damage from heroes that don't care about reduced attack damage. Leshrac is a great example because his damage comes from spells. Zeus can chew through Tiny's HP bar with his % health damage, and Stark won't mind stealing your stats even if it takes you 20 seconds to die. He also doesn't do particularly well against mana burners because he'd like to be able to cast his spells. He's a solid pick against heroes that rely on attacks to kill you because of your insane levels of tankiness and craggy passive. Ricky, for example. He's also really good against squishies in general because of his ability to blow people up with a full combo. A special mention goes to Bloodseeker because of course, you can't get blood from a stone.
Tusk.
This guy's kit is one of the most dynamic in the game, and while he may not deal the most damage or have the best lockdown, he has a spell that comes in handy in a variety of situations. Tusk innately reduces the attack speed of enemies around him. This innate levels with his third ability, which changes based on Tusk's chosen facet. Tag Team makes him create an aura where enemies under its effects take extra damage and are slowed, and Drinking Buddies pulls an ally closer to him, increasing both of their damage and giving them a move speed buff. The former is the traditional choice, but I feel like Drinking Buddies has a lot of unexplored potential, especially with Snowball is a weird spell that is both used as a save tool and an initiation tool. He charges up a snowball in place, becoming invulnerable. Tusk can then select allied heroes to get inside the snowball with him. The snowball then launches, moving toward an enemy, stunning the target, and dealing damage based on the number of allied heroes inside the snowball. It's really weird, but a good Tusk will use it to cancel an enemy's initiation, completely screwing over heroes like Legion Commander, Magnus, and Axe. His ice shards are a nuke and trapping ability. He shoots out shards in a target direction, dealing damage to targets it passes through, and creates an arc of impassable ice at a target location. If used correctly, it can completely cut off an enemy's escape route. His shard increases the depth of the arc and causes enemies caught inside to be slowed and take damage over time. His ultimate is Walrus Punch, an empowered auto attack that deals bonus critical damage and knocks a target up into the air. He also gets an Aghanim Scepter to get Walrus Kick, a targeted ability that allows Tusk to kick an enemy in a chosen direction. You can use this as a get off me tool or throw the enemy into an unfortunate situation. This can also be used while snowballing to get out scot-free. For talents, Facet damage at 10, Snowball damage at 15, Ice Shards cooldown at 20, and Snowball cooldown at 25. This hero doesn't have the most damage, but he trades that for a lot of utility and pretty decent lockdown. Walrus Punch is a great lockdown spell, and pair that with the Shards and Snowball for even more CC and a bit of save too. Tusk isn't particularly tanky though, so he's susceptible to getting bursted down after initiating. However, he is quite possibly the best counter initiator in the game, with his Snowball and Walrus Kick giving his team some assurance that there will be a way to bail them out. And that's it for this episode. Leave a like if you learned something, a comment if you want to say something, and subscribe if you haven't already. Tune in for the next episode as we talk about even more Wait a second. This series is supposed to end with this video, but it says here I'm slated for another episode despite covering every single support. Now, what? Wait, what is that? Why the fuck is that here? Oh my goodness!